In the small village of Willow Creek, nestled in the heart of Oklahoma land, lived a young couple, Olivia and Ethan. They were known throughout the village for their kindness, wisdom, and strong values. Olivia was a skilled farmer, and Ethan was an exceptional weaver. Together, they had a beautiful child named Ava. Ava was a bright and curious child, but she had a unique condition that made her behave differently from the other children in the village. She would often wander off on her own, exploring the forests and fields surrounding the village. She would talk to animals, and they would seem to understand her. She would also ask questions that no one could answer, and she would see things that no one else could see. As Ava grew older, her behavior became more and more of a concern to the villagers. They would see her talking to herself or laughing at things that weren't there. They would see her wandering off into the forest, alone and unafraid. And they would hear her asking questions that no one could answer. The villagers began to whisper among themselves, saying that Ava was cursed, or that she was possessed by evil spirits. They would warn their children to stay away from her, and they would avoid her parents, Olivia and Ethan. On a fateful day, while Ava was playing near the village stream, she saw a group of children struggling to catch fish. She tried to help them, using her unique abilities to communicate with the fish. But the children were afraid of her, and they ran away, screaming. The villagers heard about the incident, and they began to call Ava a witch. They said that she was using her powers to harm the children, and they warned everyone to stay away from her. Olivia and Ethan tried to defend their daughter, but the villagers would not listen. They were shunned by the community, and they were forced to live on the outskirts of the village. As the years passed, Ava grew more and more isolated. She would spend hours alone in the forest, talking to animals and exploring the natural world. She would also spend hours helping her parents with their farm work, using her unique abilities to communicate with the plants and animals. But despite her isolation, Ava's reputation as a witch continued to spread. The villagers would whisper about her in hushed tones, and they would warn their children to stay away from her. Then, disaster struck. A severe drought hit the land, and the crops began to wither and die. The villagers were desperate, and they did not know what to do. They called upon the village elder, a wise and respected man named Steve, to help them find a solution. Steve called upon the villagers to gather at the village square, and he asked them to bring Ava with them. The villagers were hesitant at first, but eventually, they brought Ava to the village square. Steve looked at Ava with kind eyes, and he asked her to tell him what she saw. Ava closed her eyes, and she began to describe a vision she had seen. She described a hidden underground spring, deep in the forest, which was the source of the drought. She explained that the spring was being blocked by a large rock, and that the rock needed to be removed in order for the spring to flow again. But the villagers were skeptical. They had never believed in Ava's visions before, and they didn't believe in them now. "How can we trust her?" one of the villagers asked. "She's just a child, and she's always talking about things that no one else can see." Just as it seemed like the villagers were going to dismiss Ava's vision entirely, a strong gust of wind blew through the village square. The wind was so strong that it knocked over several of the villagers' market stalls, causing damage to their goods. As the villagers rushed to clean up the mess, Ava spoke up again. "The wind is a sign," she said. "It's a sign that the spring is real, and that it's trying to break free." The villagers were stunned. They had never seen a wind like that before, and they didn't know what to make of it. But as they looked at Ava, they saw something in her eyes that gave them pause. They saw a deep conviction, a sense of knowing that they couldn't ignore. Slowly but surely, the villagers began to nod in agreement. They decided to follow Ava's instructions, to see if they could find the hidden spring. And as they set out into the forest, they felt a sense of hope that they hadn't felt in weeks. After hours of searching, they finally found the spring. It was just as Ava had described it, a small, crystal-clear pool of water surrounded by rocks and trees. And sure enough, there was a large rock blocking the spring's flow. The villagers worked together to remove the rock, and as they did, the spring began to flow once more. The water was cool and clear, and it seemed to bring new life to the parched earth. As the villagers made their way back to the village, they were met with cheers and celebration. The drought was finally over, and the village was saved. And Ava, the young girl who had once been shunned and rejected, was hailed as a hero. The villagers apologized to Olivia and Ethan for their mistreatment, and they asked for their forgiveness. Olivia and Ethan, who had always known that their daughter was special, forgave the villagers and welcomed them back into their lives. From that day on, Ava was no longer shunned by the villagers. Instead, she was celebrated and revered for her unique gifts. The villagers learned to appreciate and respect her differences, and they learned to see the world through her eyes. As Ava grew older, she became a renowned healer and seer, known throughout the land for her wisdom and her gifts. People would come from far and wide to seek her help and guidance, and she would use her powers to heal the sick, to bring fertility to the land, and to guide those who were lost. And though she faced many challenges and obstacles along the way, Ava never forgot the lessons she had learned as a child. She never forgot the pain of being rejected and shunned, and she never forgot the joy of being accepted and celebrated. Years later, when Ava had grown old and wise, she would look back on her life with pride and gratitude. She would remember the struggles she had faced and the triumphs she had achieved, and she would know that she had lived a life of purpose and meaning, a life that had made a difference in the world. The story of Ava teaches us that everyone has something unique to offer and that our differences are what make us special. It teaches us to appreciate and respect each other's gifts and to see the world through each other's eyes. And it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future.